Good morning, happy Tuesday. I know this is News Day, and so I should be bringing you news about what's going on in the world of Nikos. But the reality is that I wanted to make this particular video now so that it'd be useful for the entire holiday season. I know that we just got past Halloween and we're headed towards the big two, big three, really, and we want to be considerate of those people who travel to events with family and friends. And so, whether you have a Friendsgiving kind of a gathering or a family Thanksgiving or even just a traditional get together here in the holiday season, I want to provide you with what I consider to be the best list of the games to take to grandma's house. Of course, this idea comes from the old song about going over the river and through the woods to grandmother's house for the holidays. And so we're going to be talking about a wide array of games here. Now, I am going to be a little broken up in the way I do this simply because I'm drawing some data for your benefit from BoardGameGeek.com. I do not do reviews normally, although I have considered it. But when I do videos that are review like in nature, I always put the disclaimer that these are unsolicited. I will never take a penny for promoting a game because I'm only promoting the stuff that I personally love and things that if they are accessible, I have a copy. If I don't have a copy, I will draw attention to that fact, but I will explain why I don't have a copy if that is the case. I'm going to break it down across standard categories because if you have never been with this channel before, you don't know anything about who I am. And I'm Jonathan Albin, and I consider myself to be the Game Master's Guide because I've been a storyteller and game master for role-playing games, and indeed an advocate for all tabletop games, going all the way back to when I was 11, when I first picked up the shield, so to speak, for role-play games. But in saying that, I do also want to clarify that the purpose for today's show and other shows like this is to advocate for gameplay across the board. I don't care what kind of games you like to play. I try to provide a list every year for my viewers and fans to give them an idea. This will be made into a physical product in the next week or so, and that will be available from my website at NycosRPG.com for anybody who wants it. And if you make a comment below and PM me directly, I will go ahead and get a copy of the paper version out to you right away. But this list of games to take at grandma's, again, is an unsolicited list of the products that I advocate for simply because they're really good games. And some of the bits that we're going to go into will include little factoids about each of the products as I have access to them, and even some pertinent news stories that you might be aware of concerning the products. So we're going to start off right off the top with classic playing cards. If you understand what I mean by classic playing cards, I'm talking about a standard 52 card deck. Some include the jokers as well, so it can make it up to a 54 card deck. But generally speaking, classic playing cards by definition are the standard 52 card 4-suit deck. And so the game that comes in as my best game to take to grandma's is cribbage. Now, what's interesting about cribbage is that it's a game that doesn't suck. But I have to say it that way only because the guy who invented it, according to the sources that I was able to find on the web, was a guy by the name of Sir John Suckling. Now, that's a very hysterical name to me because cribbage by far doesn't suck. It's a very popular European card game, started in the early 17th century as a derivative of an older game called Noddy. Noddy, not the Naughty, no. Noddy, Noddy. but the game added the concept of a discard pile, the second hand, or the crib, from which cribbage gets its name. It's a 15 to 30, maybe 35-minute card game, 121 points, sophisticated scoring system, and a whole lot of historical lore that goes into it. Many of the people who play it develop a kind of a sing-song approach to the scoring mechanism, which of course is why it appealed to me, because there's a much more of a fun environment to it when you use the sing-song methodology. But the game's known throughout the world, in particular for its scoring mechanism, which is generally a board. Hang on just a second. I've got a difficulty on this end I got to take care of. Hang on.
Absorbing damage is the name of the game. From the claws of monsters or the heat from a ball of flame. Our strength in numbers is a roll of the dice. Played 1,000 hours.
Oh no. Can't find my place back. Okay, there we go. Sorry for that. I have a bit of a head cold and I had to take care of that. So Sir John Suckling invented the game back in the early 17th century from the game, as I mentioned, Noddy, Noddy, and this game is most noted for its scoring mechanism, which is a generally 121 hole board in up to 4 lanes, and these are generally made out of wood, although historically this game was particularly popular among New England sailors and others that were fishermen along the coast who would receive scrimshaw boards made out of ivory from the various tribes, and they became very popular. So they unfortunately contributed to the whaling business and other industries like that. Narwhal horns and such make really fascinating boards. But even now they make some very ornate and high quality cribbage boards. You can find them ubiquitously. And I have to say that of all trading card all of the non-trading card, affiliated traditional card games, cribbage is the cat's meow, and it can be played by up to, I believe, 5 or 6 or even 8 players with special mechanisms for who gets to provide cards to the crib and so on. But just know that it's a great game for 2 players all the way up to comfortably 4 to 6 players, with, again, rules stipulations for that included in the game. The ubiquity of it means that it's a game that it's easy to carry, easy to transport, and even without the board, it can be, you can of course can track the points on a piece of paper or whatever, but generally the cribbage board is one of the greatest elements of appeal to that game, and it definitely goes very high. As a matter of fact, if I was forced to have to play only one game for the rest of my life, other than the one that I've invented, I would have to say that cribbage would be it. The next category of games are word games. Word games can come in two or three different categories. Some can be trivia games. Some might be exclusionary games where you're trying to get them to not say certain words or whatever. But there are word games that are based on the value that the words have, and others that are based on the characters that make up the words. And so we're going to be talking about 2 different ones in particular. The first one we're going to talk about is, where'd it go? Where did I put it? See, I told you, I warned you this was going to be a situation. Okay, so next on the list would be the ones made out of letters, which would be bananagrams. And bananagrams is one of the relative rogues on my list in that the game Bananagrams is still being produced by, from what I can tell, Bananagrams Incorporated. There's no sub company that's actually producing it. And Bananagrams is, if you are familiar with Scrabble or other crossword type games, Bananagrams is, I believe, one of the most innovative mechanisms because the rule system can be adapted based on who is playing. So the game consists of players drawing a certain collective of tiles that have letters on them. And unlike Scrabble, where there is a points value to the particular letters, in this case, the Bananagrams tiles simply have the letters themselves, and the points are accrued by the number of tiles that you have in play. And the objective of the game is to make a anagram cross stick, so crisscross like a crossword puzzle, with all of the letters being used properly in proper spelling, left to right, top to bottom, and you build out your acrostic using all of your tiles, and you keep playing until all the tiles have been drawn, and the first person, in the most basic version, the first person to complete their acrostic with all of their tiles is the winner. Therefore, it's just about the interconnections that you make and how quickly you can create words. We have utilized that game 100 different ways, and it is, like I said, one of the ones that I absolutely advocate for. And it can be found at most hobby stores that you, of course, can order from the company directly as well. But the idea of Bananagrams is that its appeal is that you can play it, for example, by saying no more than 7-letter words if you're playing with kids. Or you can say the adults must make 5-letter words, and the kids in the group can be playing with 3-letter words. You can play it with people who have learning disabilities and therefore play at a slower, easier pace. It doesn't have to be competitive in terms of speed. It can simply be a continuation until everyone has completed their puzzles. And you can play it with Boggle-like rules where you eliminate words that are the same in each puzzle. Or you can play it by theme, by saying you get bonus points for building words that are within the theme, such as maybe a holiday game, so it's a Christmas game or whatever. And so therefore you're looking for words that have a holiday bend to them, and therefore giving more points to those. There's so many ways to use the tiles to play. They are just absolutely, like I said, the cat's meow. If it wasn't for cribbage having such a deep place in my heart, I might put Bananagrams in that same category. But I think you're going to find, I hate to say it, that every one of these games fit in this category, because I wouldn't recommend a game that couldn't be picked up by anyone from a 4 or 5 year old all the way up to grandma or whatever, great grandma, or however old you can go. But the idea is that the Bananagrams as an archetype of the letter type games is absolutely my biggest recommendation. What's really nice about it is that its size is portable, and it's very identifiable because its packaging is actually a cloth banana. You can make all kinds of jokes about it, I suppose, but it's got a zipper down the side, and you put the tiles inside of the bag, and it's really easy to carry, really easy to stuff into your baggage. So when you're taking stuff to grandma's, it's a no-brainer to add into the collection. The next one that still fits in the word category that I would absolutely say is a must-have is actually a modern version of an older game. So I'm going to talk about both. The game that I'm speaking of is 2015's release of Monikers. It's currently being published by CMYK Games, I believe, and Palm Court also is listed here. But the concept of monikers is the same as an older game of a similar rules mechanism called Time's Up. And I haven't looked into it to see whether they're directly related, but the concept of each game is the same in that you have a word. Each of the cards you have words on them, and you are choosing which word you're going to use as the clue, and you're going to recite that to your opponent without telling them the actual word. In the first round, you're going to say anything you want to say as long as you don't say the words on the card, and then you get them to guess what it is that's on the card. Now you can anytime pass. So if it's a word that you don't know, or perhaps it's a personality or a place that doesn't ring any bells with you, you can simply pass. But you're going through to collect as many points for words that are spoken by your partner that you were trying to target. So therefore, you just keep going until you've run out of time. And that's the reason why the original game was called Time's Up, is you only have so many minutes for that round. All those cards that you and your partner did successfully score on become part of the collective deck. And so each team kind of wants to watch and be listening carefully to the conversation between the clue giver and the respondent, because in round one you can say as much as you want, but in round two you're going to go through those same cards, the collected groups of all the cards that were scored upon. They're going to be shuffled up and randomized, but now you're going to go through the same set of words again, but this time you can only say one word. And you can reinforce that word with actions, but you can't ever say any additional words. You got to choose whatever word you've said is all you can continue to repeat. And so, again, you can always pass if a word your partner doesn't seem to be getting it, or you used a word that is going to be too vague or whatever. But the idea is you go through again to see how many points you score, and you're going to track that score in addition to the round one score. And then finally in round three, you're going to go through the exact same situation, the exact same cards shuffled up again, but this time you're going to be only able to pantomime, only be able to make gestures and use your hands, your mannerisms, your facial features, facial positioning or whatever to get people to guess. So monikers is exactly the same as the original Time's Up. The game does include a sand timer that lets you know how much time you have to go through the cards each round. And some versions allow you to have more time on the later turns. Sometimes they don't. It's a matter of how you want to look at it. But the game monikers, again, is really clever. There are expansions which get added new cards. You could make your own. Once you understand the mechanism, you can add your own words into the list of possible cards that could be played. And it just makes for a really fun, engaging interaction in teams, which is really good for family events because you can play with 4, 6, 8. You could play boys versus girls. There's all kinds of ways you could do this. So it's a very fun experience. And again, if I only had one game, well, I've already given you that speech before. So as I said, this is monikers from CMYK Games. Okay. So that's the two word games. I want to now go on to the next category. And I think I just did those backwards. Icebreaker games. And icebreakers are the games that you play with people you don't know very well to get to know them. They're the games that you play if for example, your family event is only once a year you see each other, or you perhaps are at a Friendsgiving situation where you know people but you don't know them well. Icebreaker games are those games that can literally break the ice and make things more comfortable. There are tons of games that could fit into this category. In particular, we're going to be looking at. Oh, that was what monikers were supposed to be. Ha ha ha! Got ahead of myself. So monikers would be what I would consider to be my choice for an icebreaker because it gets you familiar with the people you're playing with and how they think. And it's also really light, loose. There's not a lot of other than simply how many points were scored. There's not really a lot to the game in terms of strategy or whatever about your dealing with your opponents. So it's very light in that case. So the next are classic board games, and when I mean classic board game, that's literally the old concept of roll your dice, move your mice. You literally roll the dice, move the marker, and then if there's instructions on the board, you follow the instructions on the board, and those are your turns. There aren't a lot of classic board games left that are truly enjoyable. Almost everybody's familiar with the ubiquitous one that grandma's going to have in a closet, so you don't have to take a copy there. If somebody really wants to play it, you know which one I'm talking about. You know which one I'm talking about. There's a game out there that everybody has that is considered to be the classic board game, but I'm telling you, the one that you want, the by far the most enjoyable classic board game that's out there is Run for Your Life Candyman by Smirk and Dagger Games. If you are familiar at all with Smirk and Dagger, they are very, very much a company that has their tongue firmly in their cheek. And Run for Your Life Candyman is a emulation of the original Candyland map mechanism, a meandering pathway across the board that eventually ends up with the players arriving at Grandma's house or whatever the equivalent is. Well, in Run for Your Life Candyman, the game is much more dark, and while it can be played with kids, it's kind of silly, but the actual mechanism of the game is as you are moving across the board, you are playing a gingerbread man who is literally running through the mystical fantasy forest, trying not to be eaten by all of the horrible monsters that would be expected to be in a forest fairy tale land. And so, as you are accosted by the different denizens, they do damage to your poor gingerbread man. And so now I have to admit, this is the one game that I don't currently own. It was in my collection until my house burned a couple of years ago. Well, not my house, but my storage unit burned, and I lost all of my board games. But the last time I played it, if I recall correctly, you actually tear up your persona sheet, the little drawing of your gingerbread man as you take damage. And so, as I remember, one of the players literally hopping along on one leg, poor gingerbread man, trying to make it to the end as he's being ravaged by the various monsters in the story. And as you would expect in the Candyman Run for Your Life Candyman map, you're meandering around, and sometimes you go backwards, and sometimes you back up a few steps and whatever. So it's very much roll your dice, move your mice, but it's an hysterically fun classic board game. And there aren't many of those that I would highly recommend. But again, if I only had one. All right, and next would be the category of evergreen games. And by evergreen, I mean they've been published by dozens of different companies over the years, and each publisher may do slight variations, but the rules have been generally the same. In this case, we're talking about Carcassonne, and Carcassonne originated back in, gosh, what year? That was one of the things I was going to talk about. It's been around since 2000? No, it's older than that. It's only recently released by Z-Man Games, but Carcassonne has been around for the majority of the classic era of board games. It might be only 2000, but I don't think so. I think it was out I'll have to look into it. But Carcassonne is a game currently made by Z-Man Games, and its history is with a company called Hans im Glück from Germany. And the one thing to mention about it is that it has the dubious distinction of making the claim that it was one of the very first games to use the term meeple. And if you are familiar with the company and the brand, there was something that happened in this last year called Meeplegate and dealt with the rights of using the word meeple. And it's an interesting story, but it's really not the kind of information that I go in for. I don't like to get involved with the politics of it, but just realize this is the game from which that entire conversation has come. They actually revised their rules recently to actually call them meeples, although in their original version they didn't. So whether or not the name meeples is associated in terms of legality with Carcassonne, they are associated with Carcassonne in theory going all the way back, because as long as I've owned the game, we consider them to be meeples, even though the rules didn't state that. I'm not going to claim on either side, so I'm going to only simply say that they alleged to be the creators of the term meeple and have tried to enforce it to much lesser extent than might be possible if they were. Well, anyway, that's as far as I'm going to go on that. I still recommend Carcassonne. It's a tile setting game, so you're literally placing tiles in a map-like format. As you're adding them, they have to attach to someplace on the already placed tiles, and you score points by completing roads or building cities, creating farmlands and the like. And it's 2 to 5 players by design. I've seen them add additional meeple colors, little token pieces, colors to the game, so you could play with more, but generally it's a 2 to 5 player game. They list it as 30 to 45 minutes, but if you add any of the expansions, you can seriously increase the amount of time it takes to play through, because you play until all tiles are placed. It's a non-sophisticated, it's a low crunchiness game, so it's relatively easy to pick up, and it's certainly a game that can be played over and again because the map changes each time you play. So I would, again, if there was only one in this category that I could choose, this would be my go-to, or my number one. The last category that I'm going to cover in terms of this are new crop bounties, and that means these are products that have come out in the last couple of years, and have drawn enough interest to put themselves into my current rotation when I go to family events. This one states that it's dated from 2020. All the references I'm pulling from are from BoardGameGeek.com, so just wanted to, that is a universal site, and I'm again not advocating for them. I'm not affiliated with that organization in any way, but the Cloud City game, published by Blue Orange Games, is a wonderful. It's a combination between tile setting and city piece setting. So it's similar to Carcassonne, at least mechanically, in a couple of ways, and it's arguably just a little bit more sophisticated than Carcassonne, and it's also because it's newer. And the idea here is that you're building a city in the clouds, connecting your structures together with walkways, and you're getting awarded points by the number of walkways and the length of those walkways and the intricacy of the patterns that you create. So it's got a lot of tactile value. For my part, it also has a great bits quotient, a BQ value, because the pieces in it could be used for other purposes, such as epic scale, terrain. So theater scale warfare terrain. These would make great buildings for that as well. So Cloud City is my choice, my newest choice that I would add to the list. So what you will find with the games to take to grandma's list is that I'm building on it year over year, because the reality is that when we go to visit family, we want to take the things that are enjoyable and familiar. And so by having a list of games that are your go-to, solid, dependable games, you make sure that everybody has good times when you go to those family events. Okay, so now I'm going to honorable mentions. And honorable mentions are generally the properties that have been on my rotation in the past that I still would have you take if you've got plenty of room. I would take this list first, take these games in particular first, because this way you've covered the gamut from the sophisticated youngster, sophisticated older person that has played a lot of games to the brand new player who's never played anything. This group of games covers that gamut. But there are a couple that I would like to make honorable mention of. And of course, the stinger here is that there is one that I am kind of personally involved with, and I'll draw attention to that. But as I said before, these are all not games that I promote or review for any revenue. They are simply things that I dearly love. So my honorable mentions are in the same category. So, for example, a perennial that you should have with you if you've played any board games at all, you more than likely have with you or are aware of Settlers of Catan, which is now just simply called Catan. And there are expansions to the Catan system. You can play the base game covers 2 to 4 players. Additions allow you to play 5 and 6 players. You can add more sophisticated play, longer play, new play dynamics. So that's a kind of a no-brainer. Apples to Apples, perennial favorite, because it lets you icebreaker without having to have break the bank, so to speak. You can pick up a copy even at your general department stores, Walmarts and Targets and the like. And Catan is an instant winner. Just about everybody who plays games with any regularity has at least played it once, and it's a game that continues to show its value over time. Other examples of honorable mentions would be it's ironic, both it's a really long list and it's a really easy list. Obviously Scrabble, Boggle, and particularly the Super Boggle is a great one. It, like Bananagrams, can be scaled, so you can change the scoring mechanism to allow a youngster to have a bit of an edge, or you can make the game more challenging by having the older players only limit their word size to a certain number of letters or more. But the value of a Bananagrams is timeless in terms of other games. There are many that are no longer in publication, like Snake Oil, which arguably is a little bit more aggressive form of apples to apples, where you actually pitch the would-be chooser on why your idea should be picked. And there are dozens and dozens of games I could include, but I want to thank you for being with me for the duration of this show. These are my picks. I'll go back over them really quickly as a review. And this also will be used as a video short. If you are a role-play gamer, I'm sorry I didn't mention any of them. There are 2 that I would mention, but I can only mention one of them, and that is No Thank You Evil. If you are a role player and you have small children, or even if you don't, you might want to look at No Thank You Evil, because the gameplay of it is so simplistic and dynamic. It actually has in it advocacy within the game for players to share with others, which is absolutely necessary in role-play games for older players, but it's particularly useful for the youngsters. So even if you're playing with, I believe it or not, 4 and 5-year-olds can actually play No Thank You Evil, because the dynamics of it allow them to have the various skills. In the game, you have your classic skills of how strong you are, how smart you are, how fast you are, but you also added a distinct one called awesome. And this extra attribute of awesome is absolutely amazing because it allows the player to gain benefit when they share with another. So even though they, for example, it may be their turn to do something, they can choose to use awesome to let somebody else make the action. Even if they thought it out, they can offer it to another player by utilizing their awesome skill, and therefore advance their players' growth in game by becoming more awesome. Fascinating tool. Second thing about it in particular is that each player is provided a token that says on it, No Thank You Evil. And the concept is, as the storyteller is building the drama of the scene and the danger inherent in it, and all the stuff that makes a role-playing encounter fun, the players can at any time toss their No Thank You Evil tile down on the tabletop. And if they do, the game master has to immediately change the story dynamic at that instant to make it less stressful, less scary, and therefore the play can then continue down a different path. And this is really useful for youngsters that haven't built up the resilience. And arguably in today's world, you may find it useful for your older players to have a similar mechanic in your games as well. And so I would recommend taking a look at No Thank You Evil. That's on a game in the role-play category. I do not recommend taking role-play games to your family on the extended holiday only, because if they are not amenable to it, you can cause challenges with it. So I did not include it in my games to take to grandma's list, but therein lies the rub. I do want to mention it. So quickly going over them all again. If you are a role player, see, I did it again. Got to start that again. Take 3. If you're going to grandma's house and you want to take some games with you, here's the bang on best games to take to your grandma's house to play games this year. Whether you're talking about Christmas, Thanksgiving, Friendsgiving, whatever situation you are in, this list of games are surefire winners, and you absolutely should include them in your inventory. And if you don't know them, find a source nearby. Your local game store is a great place to go to pick things up. And remember, when you're thinking of buying gifts, think games. All right, so here we go. Classic playing card games. Number 1 on the list, cribbage. That includes the cribbage board. The idea of a quick scoring game that's played with a standard deck of 52 cards. It's an absolute winner. Number 2, word games. And this is particular talking about individual words. You're going to be looking for bananagrams. Packaging is easy to spot. Made by Bananagrams Incorporated. It is the packaging is a cloth banana. I kid you not. And it keeps all the tile pieces in there. Great little game. And then based on anagrams, the idea of mixing and matching words and changing spellings as you go to complete a crossword. Number 3, icebreakers. And under icebreakers, carte blanche, the one card game that I would absolutely recommend, number 1, is monikers, under the older name of Time's Up. Same mechanic. You're going to have words on cards. You're getting your player to say the words on the cards by saying anything you want to in round 1. Round 2, you're going to only be able to say one word, and in round 3, all pantomime and hand gestures. So fast game, great icebreaker, monikers. Next, and that's by CMYK Games. Next, classic board games. Hands down, the one classic board game you have to find is Run for Your Life, Candyman. It's a lighthearted but rather dark game where you are a gingerbread man trying to run through the fantasy forest without being eaten by all of the denizens cooked, boiled, and all that kind of horrible things. But it's very tongue in cheek and a lot of fun. That's by Smirk and Dagger Games. Next, Evergreen Products. You're going to want to look for Carcassonne. Hands down, one of the best games out there. It's aging in that it's older now, but they just come out with some new supplements for it. As a matter of fact, there's a new Mists over Carcassonne. I haven't played it. That's actually one of the things I'm looking forward to this year is possibly to pick up a copy of that for, I don't know, perhaps someone will find that for me for my Christmas list. But Mists Over is a new one, Mists Over Carcassonne. So check those out. But the base game of Carcassonne is tile setting. You're placing tiles on a board in a map-like way to build roads, build cities, grow farmlands. Very peaceful kind of game. Objective is to have the most points at the end. That's currently being made by Z-Man Games, I believe. They may have changed publishers again. New crop bounties. It has to be the new game Cloud City. Cloud City is again a tile laying and structure building game, and it's relatively new. It came out in 2000 and published by Blue Orange Games. It's a definite game you'll want to include in your games to take to grandma's. Finally, I've mentioned some of the honorable mentions before. Settlers of Catan, no brainer. If you've got a more edgy family, check out Werewolf. There are dozens of games I could mention, but these are the ones you want to take with you when you go to your friends for holidays. And with this list, I highly recommend you watch all the videos here on the Game Master's Guide, NycosRPG. And I will see you all in the next video. Do remember that we broadcast at 10 a.m. and 11 p.m. Pacific time every day. Tonight is important. If you haven't watched me recently, definitely watch tonight's show at 11 p.m. I'm sorry, yes, at 11 p.m. here on NycosRPG, the Nykos Nightly News by the GNOME News Network. It's going to be, or should say, GNOME News Network, but there's a lot going on in the campaigns of Nykos, and I think you really want to be a part of that. Thank you again for being here, and we'll see you in the next time. I'm Jonathan Albin, and this has been NycosRPG's Game Master's Guide.